Hello, welcome to the Quakes Motel. My name's Conan. A couple of weeks ago, I shared my ultimate template. However, it was for the new MPC 3 firmware. I've had so many requests from you guys who are sticking with 2.15 for now. And because I love the community and I love you guys so much, I've decided to make the ultimate template for 2.15. And also, you can open it in the software. I've tested it. It works. Let's jump in. So obviously there are a few differences between the MPC 3 firmware and the old 2.15, but pretty much I've been able to copy the template and put it into 2.15 so that you guys who are sticking with 2.15 for now can use this template instead. And it's basically exactly the same. There's just a few little things that are different. So what I'll do is I'll quickly run through, not in as much detail. You can check out my video on the template for 3.0 because it's the same. That goes into a lot more detail, but I will go through it just quickly to explain where some of the differences are and just the basic outline of it if you haven't watched the other video. But I will link that video below, or I'll link it up here. Or what is it that YouTubers do? I'll link it up here. Up or down there. So as per the ultimate template for MPC 3, I have a track set up and there isn't anything on the track at all. There's no inserts. The reason why I've done that is because obviously everybody's drum programs or samples or whatever are going to be different. So there's not really any point in doing that whatsoever, or adding anything on there whatsoever. So I've left it completely blank. It's the same with the audio track as well. That's left completely blank. So really the major differences, or rather not the major differences, it's exactly the same, except for you can't change the color of the submix. You can't rename the submix as far as I can work out anyway. You might be able to if you can, and that's brilliant. So you have to just remember what submix is what submix. And as I explained in the other video, I have set all the volumes, including the program, the audio, into the mix, the submixes, the returns, the main output, programs, everything is set to -6. Now this is a guideline. This is to help you start gain staging. It's not going to gain stage your mix for you, but it's a start. Starting with -6 already gives you a bit of headroom. Now, a few people have pointed out that pre-fader, post-fader, etc. Without going into too much detail, I really tried to stress in the last video that this is just a guideline. It isn't a definitive. You must set it to -6. It's just to help you out to start with. So, you know, it's not going to mix it for you, but it will help you start not instantly clipping everything. And I am going to be doing a video on gain staging. I know I've said it a million times, but I will. I promise. I absolutely promise. So, like I said, the main differences are you can't change the names of the submixes and you can't add colors, etc. You also don't have the arranger screen, so you can't access, you know, like for instance in the grid and the arranger screen on 3, you can look at where the subs are. There's a button down here which gives you access to the submixes, the masters, outs, returns, etc. You haven't got that on 2.15, so you can't do that. You have to access it through the mixer page, track mix. Okay, so we'll just quickly explain what I've got going on with the submixes. From memory, Submix 1 is my drums. Okay, so if I just turn everything on there, I've basically set it up the way that I would normally set up my drum bus, with compression into EQ, into tube drive for a bit of flavour, and then finishing off with MPC 60. As per the template for 3.0, I have set everything up for you. The compressors are set up as a guideline for a drum bus. For instance here, you know, a 3.1 ratio, you can go up to 4.1. Attack slower, so you let the transients through, and a quick attack to give you that punch. The EQ is set up as a guideline again, with the lows kind of where roughly the fundamental is for most kick drums, your mud area, your clarity area, and of course your 8K at the top, the excitement frequency at the top there. So again, it's set up as a guideline. Tube drive I've zeroed for you because the default is not zeroed for some reason. It's just a bit weird. And then the MPC 60 for flavour at the end. Submix 1, Submix 2, okay, bass. Air compressor is set up as kind of like an opto compressor, which is what I tend to use on bass. EQ again, sorry, maximizer next. Maximizer is just going to help you level out the notes from a bass. Especially with live basses, you get a big dynamic range from the quiet notes to the loud notes. So the maximizer helps you. It's very similar to, I don't want to say similar, it kind of does the same kind of job that MV2 for Waves does, which is a plugin I use all of the time for bass. So it's going to help you reduce the dynamic range in the bass and just give it a little bit of flavour and just kind of get the low notes and the high notes kind of sitting together. You don't want it crushed. You don't want them to sit exactly the same, but it'll just help you get in the ballpark. Power EQ, MPC 60 at the end. Submix 3 is synths. There we go, synths. So again, I've set this up for you, compression, EQ, the vintage filter. I will say this, when I loaded it up on my MPC software, I literally just double clicked the template and it opened the MPC software. It loaded everything apart from vintage filter. Now I use 2.15 software. I believe there was a 2.51. Is it possible that Air Vintage Filter became available in that? I don't actually remember, I'm going to be honest with you. But just in case you do open it in your software and you get the same problem as me, maybe if you make sure your software is completely up to date. Mine isn't. It's, I think, 1 or 2 versions back. So Air Vintage Filter was the only thing that didn't open on the software. But there again, you see, got that set up for you. Again, tube drive is zeroed. You've got your vintage filter. So good stuff for synths. Number 4 is guitars. So we've got compression, you've got your EQ, you've got your tube drive, again, zeroed. Good to say that's the default. Air flavor, amp guitar. You know, these are all guidelines. I just want to point out they are all guidelines. They're not, you know, they're not definitive. You don't have to stick to this. But the point of my template is so that you guys, when you start mixing or when you start a track, you've got a lot of stuff already in place and you don't really have to worry too much about the mixing side of things. You can kind of mix as you go along and you're not looking for what EQ, what compressor, how do I set the compressor up? You can just flow. That's what I want for you guys. I want you to be able to just flow. Number 5 is what I call sample. Okay, so what that would be a sample. So you have to treat a sample as a whole track because often you've got drums, bass, strings, guitar, Rhodes, etc., whatever in there. So the way I've got that set up is pretty similar to a mix bus. You've got your compression, you've got your EQ, you've got your air lo-fi if you want to give it some bite. I've set that up. I've left that at default actually. I'm pretty certain that is the default. So obviously if you want to start getting 12-bit flavor, you can drop that down, take the sample rate down to, sample rate down to kind of 26.2, then you're in a kind of SP1200 territory, take that down to about 12. That's what you can do to kind of get in the ballpark. But that's why Air Lo-Fi is there for you. And then MPC 60 at the end for that flavor that you know I all love. 6, vocals. So you got the Air Vocal Tuner. It's not brilliant, but it does kind of do the job. Air compressor. The way that I have this set up, there's a classic technique that a lot of engineers use where you have an 1176 that catches the peaks of the vocal and then an opto compressor like an LA2A afterwards, which just kind of gives you, brings everything together. That gives you the glue. So catch the peaks, then glue it together. That's a standard setup that I've seen so many engineers use. I use it. So what I've done is I've set up the Submix 6 for vocals and I've set it up like that for you. So air compressor is set up pretty much the way that I would have an 1176 set up, about a ratio of 8:1. Not too fast attack, but you can, if you really want it to be punchy and up front, you can bring the attack up. Just be careful of the transients. Listen to the vocals. You don't want to affect it too much. Faster release, zeroed everything else for you. And then finally right at the end, next you got your opto. I'm fairly certain that this opto compressor from Akai is based on the LA2A or the LA3A. So I've set that up for you as well to be kind of like an LA2A. So that's for your glue, that's for your peaks. You don't really want more than a couple of decibels gain reduction on the air compressor. And then we've got the air power EQ set up. I've set up the high pass and low pass for you. And I've given you some kind of ranges that are generally EQs that we'd use on vocals, getting rid of the lows, getting rid of the mud, a little bit of clarity. Sometimes you want to push it, sometimes you want to attenuate, and then the 8K upwards for a bit of air. So that's your vocals. Let's come out now. Let's go out of submixes. We will go to returns. Return 1, I've got set up for you with reverb and the air power EQ. Like I've explained in quite a few videos, there's an old technique called the Abbey Road technique. And basically their argument is that with reverbs and delays, you don't tend to need anything below 600 Hertz or anything above about 10K. So I've got your reverb set up there for you. And then straight afterwards, I've got your high pass and low pass set up in the Abbey Road style. Again, it's a guide. Number 2, return 2, we have set up with delay. So you've got your reverbs on 1, your delays on 2. I've set that up exactly the same in terms of the Abbey Road style. And for 3 is kind of there for New York compression if you want to do that, parallel compression. If you want to know more about that, there's a million videos online. Maybe not a million. There's a lot of videos online for you about that. So I've just stuck that in there in case you want to do any parallel compression. Now that's your returns done. You've still got a spare return on the end there if you want to add something else. Let's go into the main outputs. This is obviously your master out. I'm zipping through this super fast, aren't I? It's because I've had 2 cups of coffee this morning. On your master out. Now, I've explained this. I've made videos about it. So this is just, again, a guideline, but a very, very general kind of master bus, mix bus setup. So you have a bit of compression, not too high ratio. You don't want more than a couple of dB of gain reduction, slower attack, faster release. And I've zeroed everything else for you. EQ, I've set up to be kind of, you're trying to get a flavor, but not too much of a flavor. So I've given you your lows, your muddy, your clarity, and your air at the top. High pass, low pass, set up quite low. High pass I've left where it is, but the lows are start off around about 20 hertz. When you can bring it up, you don't really want to go over 30 because you're going to start really, cutting into things. But I've explained that in my mix bus video. Fairly standard stuff, basically. Tube drive for a bit of flavor. Again, I've zeroed that for you. And then right at the end, limiter. Again, that's set up in a way that I tend to set up. Now, limiters are really, really good for making sure that you're not overworking everything and you're not clipping. So keep an eye on that throughout, see how much reduction. If it's doing loads and loads of work, you probably want to dial things back throughout the mix. Generally, when I bounce, and generally when I ask my clients to bounce, I ask them to turn the limiter off and make sure there's about between 6 and 3 decibels of headroom, or lower. It can be lower with 32 floating point. It doesn't really matter. 24-bit even, it's the same. But I do want some headroom. It's best to leave some headroom. Of course, if you're bouncing it out to play out somewhere, then yeah, maybe you do want some limiter on it. But the limiter is there as a guideline to make sure that you're not going over your zeros. I've set the ceiling up to 0.2. I've set the release up to 75 milliseconds. Now that is for kind of house music. And anything kind of 115 BPM up to 130, 140. So if you're obviously with boom bap and slower stuff, lo-fi stuff, you want to look at the release. So that's a guideline. It's not definitive, but I've set that up for you as a good rough guideline, basically. And that, I think, is it. We've covered the mains, we've covered the returns, we've covered the submixes, and yes, I think that is it. So like I said, this is pretty much identical to the template, the ultimate template that I made for MPC3, but it now works in 2.15 because I love you guys, and it also works on the software. Like I said, I've had so many requests for it. So there you have it. Oh, I really wanted to try and get that in under 10 minutes, and I think that I have got it in under 10 minutes. So there you go, guys. Like I said, this is set up now for you guys. It was like I hadn't forgotten about 2.15. It's just that obviously 3 came out, so I wanted to update my template. And I've got to be honest, I kind of thought that not many people would really be that bothered. But it would seem that a lot of people downloaded the template and perhaps I didn't make it clear, or it wasn't so clear at the time that you can't open something that's saved in 3. You can't open it in 2.15. You can open 2.15 stuff in 3 with a few issues, but you can't open 3 in 2.15. So as I said, I've remade the template for you guys. So now you can have a 2.15 template. And then if and when you decide to install the new firmware, I don't want to say upgrade or downgrade, we don't want to say positive or negative. When you have decided, or if you decide that you want to install firmware 3, you've got your template already for that, and you've got your template for 2.15. So thank you for watching. I hope that I made sense and the cups of coffee that I had this morning didn't make it too obvious. Thanks for watching. This is the Craig's Motel. My name's Conan. Till next time. Enjoy the template.